Hey guys, Lisa here with Evo Eats, and I am bringing to you our first make a meal at home video. Today at work we had a discussion as to whether or not we should do these videos in the cafe kitchen or if I should do them at home. And we decided rather that I should do them at home so that you can see that it can be done with limited supplies, limited tools, as well as in even the smallest of kitchens. My kitchen here at home is rather small and I don't have a lot of tools because I've taken all of my good tools to the cafe since I'm spending most of my days cooking there anyway. So now that you have your kit, you have the ingredients, what we need you to do next is find the tools that you will need. So you will need a small saucepan for the balsamic glaze. I have 2 fry pans because I am going to do chicken for my husband Tori and I'm going to do tofu for myself. So I have 2 different pans, but you're also going to see both options for the meals. So I'm just going to set these on the stove. And then also you will need a larger saucepan for your pasta. So I did already fill this with water. I'm just going to toss it on the stove. If you're following the ingredients, you want to get the things that are going to take a little bit longer time-wise. Once you get them done, you pretty much set it and forget it while you're preparing everything else. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start my hot water, as well as, I'll explain this in just a second. So I'm going to put this on the stove and put it on high and get it boiling for my pasta. And we'll check on that in just a few minutes. Okay, now that you have the pasta water going, it'll take just a few minutes to boil. You are getting some nice protein pasta. So the stuff that I'm using today is rotini made from chickpeas. You may have this exact pasta in your kit. You might have something slightly different. It's been rough to get supplies from the stores lately, as I'm sure everybody knows. So whatever your pasta is, you want to make sure you're following the directions on the back. And so with this, once my water boils, I'm going to add these for about 7 to 9 minutes. So I'm just going to set this aside for now. And the next thing that's going to take a little bit of time is the balsamic glaze. So in your kit, you have received 1 cup of balsamic vinegar. And if you smell it, you know it's very vinegary. So I'm going to just pour this vinegar into this small saucepan. And then I'm going to put this on the stove for a few minutes until it starts to boil. Here's the vinegar. I'm going to turn on my back burner to medium-high until that starts to heat. Additionally, while I'm here, I'm going to get the chicken pan and the tofu pan warming up. And I'm actually going to swap these because of the size of the burner. So I'm going to put this, and as you can see, I make mistakes too. So I'm going to actually turn this to medium because this is the front one. Turn on that one. And then I'm also going to turn on for the chicken. Okay, so now that we have the vinegar on, heating up, we have the pasta water on, getting ready to boil, and I have just turned on the heat to the pans for the chicken and the tofu, and I have here the chicken and the tofu. So I'm going to take these over to the stove with the salt and pepper and get those going. One thing that we didn't talk about in this video yet that I just want to touch on real quick is to have everything ready to go before you even start cooking. So the exception to that is that the bruschetta, I don't have everything chopped and diced yet because I'm going to be doing that while the chicken and the tofu are cooking. However, I do have the chicken sliced however I wanted it, ready to go. I have the tofu cut into slabs like I want it, ready to go. I have my salt and pepper all measured out. I use these little lids from something else just to keep my spices in. And then I also have my 1 tablespoon of dried basil. That will come pre-measured in your kit, so you don't have to worry about measuring this. But these are all ready to go, so that when I put the oil in the pan and then I add my protein, I can just sprinkle the salt and pepper and I'm good to go. The only thing that I didn't get out yet is my tongs. So I'm going to get these out, and then just a spatula for my tofu. Maybe a spatula for my tofu. We'll just use this cute little guy. So now I'm going to head back over to the stove. Now that the pan is hot, I'm going to get the chicken and the tofu on with a little bit of oil and start sizzling those up. Okay, so I'm just going to add a drizzle of my oil to each of these pans. That's for the chicken. Over here for my tofu. Now, with your kit, you probably won't have both chicken and tofu unless you've requested it. But I am a mixed family here with meat and vegetarian options, so I'm just going to go ahead and toss the chicken in there. Now, you don't want to overfill your pan, so just toss in what fits and you're good there. I'm also going to toss in just 1 slab of tofu. I know in the video I have more showing than just 1, but I really only need 1 for dinner, so I might make the rest later. Who knows? While I'm over here, I'm going to just sprinkle a little salt and pepper right onto the chicken. I'm going to come over and do the same for the tofu. Next is the pepper, just to give it a little seasoning. Also over here. And then the dried basil. And again, you probably won't be swapping back and forth between the chicken and the tofu, but I gotta make everybody happy in the house. So while I'm here, I'm also going to check on, I can see that my vinegar is not yet boiling, and I can see that my pasta water is not yet boiling. So I'm going to quickly wash my hands before I give a flip to the chicken and the tofu here. Okay, so my balsamic vinegar is not yet boiling. My pasta water is also not yet boiling. You can hear my chicken and my tofu sizzling, but they're not quite yet ready to get flipped. So I'm going to go ahead and start on my bruschetta ingredients. And so the first thing you'll have in your kit is 3 tomatoes, and we're going to dice those. You're also going to have 1 sprig of oregano, and then just a few basil leaves, as well as some garlic. So first things first, we're going to peel the garlic. Now the bag that your kit comes in, it's a green bag, and it is compostable, biodegradable. It does take a little while for it to compost and actually break down, but I like that they're green because I keep one here. It's actually right below us here, and I hook it on one of my cupboard doors so that while I am preparing any kind of fruit or veggie dish, I actually just toss the scraps usually right into the bag, and then I take it out to my compost when I'm done cooking. So that way it's a 2-for-1. You're doing better for the earth than just filling a landfill. You're composting if you have a compost, and you're not wasting the scraps. Worst part of garlic is peeling it. I tend to just take and push down a little bit until you can feel it almost crack, and then that helps to break the skin away from it. Just a quick peek on the liquids over there. It'll be probably another 60 to 90 seconds before they actually start boiling. So as you're doing the bruschetta, I'm sure as you read the ingredients, We're really just going to make sure everything is diced and chopped, and then we're just going to mix it in a bowl. So it's pretty simple despite being incredibly flavorful. The fresh herbs and spices really help to give it a flavor pop, which is super nice. Okay, checking on my stove. You can see my vinegar is actually starting to boil a little bit, and I can really smell it now as well. So I'm going to give that just another second to boil before I turn the heat down. As far as the pasta water, I'm actually going to turn the heat up to high because it's taking a little longer than I would like. Now with the chicken, you can see, oops, sorry about that, you can see the white edges forming around it, which typically means that it's about ready to get flipped. So when you're flipping it, you can see that there's a nice golden brown base on it. So I'm going to get all of these flipped. And although I flipped them, most people think that they're almost done cooking. We're actually going to let them cook for quite a bit longer on a little lower heat. Two reasons. First of all, the pasta isn't even in yet, so that'll take a minute. Second of all, you want to make sure that your chicken gets to the proper temperature. So if you have a thermometer, great, go ahead and use it. If you don't have a thermometer, we're just going to make sure to leave it on to where when you try to break it apart, it breaks pretty easily. I'm also going to flip my tofu. Now, tofu actually doesn't need to be at a specific temp before it's done cooking, because it's not meat, for one. For two, it is already a pretty processed food. Some people swear against tofu. That's perfectly fine. I kind of like it. It absorbs whatever flavors you put into it. So, vinegar is still going well. Tofu's going. Chicken's going. Pasta water is almost there. So back to the bruschetta. Okay, so here we are with the bruschetta. I have all the garlic peeled. Tomatoes, I'm going to do those last. Only because they're the messiest when they start to seep all the juices. So I have a nice chef's knife here. We're going to mince the garlic. Now if you have a garlic press, you can just press it and that's fine. I do at work, not at home. So to mince garlic, when you're chopping, make sure you get a nice claw hand. This is going to help you hold the food without cutting your fingertips off. Once you have the claw, your knife should be resting, against your knuckles and not coming above it. So a nice claw. We're going to just go through making nice small cuts. And then I like to take and turn my garlic a little bit. So when you go through the second time, you're not just putting the blade through the same cuts. And then from there, if you want really fine mince, it's kind of a free-for-all. So just carefully get the excess off the blade. And then you go back and forth, sliding everything together occasionally, wiping off the blade, and continuing to mince. Now, if you don't like a lot of garlic, you really don't have to use a ton of it. But keep mincing and mincing and mincing. Now, some of this garlic we're actually about to take over to the pan. And truly, if I was following the directions properly, I should have actually had some of this already minced because it goes in with the chicken. So I'm going to use about a teaspoon, 2 teaspoons. So there's one of the minced. Here's 2. The rest, I'm going to carefully scoop up on my knife. Make sure that if you're doing this, the blade is even with the cutting board so you don't cut yourself. I'm just going to put it in my palm. I'm going to take this over to the pan for the chicken and tofu. Okay, so chicken gets a little garlic. We're just going to sprinkle a little garlic in there here. The garlic's going to give it a nice aromatic hint to it. Same with the tofu. Sprinkle it all in. And while I'm here, I see my pasta water is boiling, so I'm going to get my pasta right in there. I also see that the balsamic is boiling and it has gone down in volume a little bit, so I'm going to turn it down just so it doesn't go too crazy. So I put it on medium-low so it can simmer while I'm cooking everything else. Let's get that pasta. So I'm going to open the pasta. Probably could have already had it open, but that's okay. Just going to pour this right in the pan. We'll start the timer. Okay, so the pasta's in, the balsamic vinegar's turned on a little bit, chicken and tofu are going, bruschetta has been started. You want the herbs to be chopped as well. So you don't really need to separate these, do them separately, anything like that. So I'm just going to take them and I kind of bunch them up. I'm going to cut them. So as they're bunched up one long ways, I'm going to cut them this way. And then I'm going to go back the other direction. So as fine as you cut the herbs is going to be all personal preference. Do you want more herbs, the flavor to pop, or if you just like the subtle flavors here and there, you'll want them to be a little smaller. The bigger leaves you have, the more it's going to be, you know, like you're chewing on a piece of lettuce. So I like mine pretty fine. It's going to give it a lot of flavor, but you're not going to have that salad feel in your mouth. And I just add them. I just have one bowl here going for the bruschetta ingredients. Next up, tomatoes. Okay, so I actually have a knife called a tomato knife. So this knife has a serrated edge. This is specifically made for tomatoes. You can use it if you want. If you have a super sharp chef's knife, you might not need the tomato knife. My chef's knife is pretty sharp, but I just like the feel of the tomato knife better. So first thing you're going to do is I'm going to core out the middle just by putting the tip of the knife in there just a little. It should not go the whole way through the tomato. It should not touch your hand. You just peel that off and put it flat side down. So I'm going to teach you a real quick trick with dicing tomatoes that I learned way back when working at Little Caesars. And that is, if you look carefully at the bottom side of the tomato, there's lines that if you cut along the lines, the tomatoes produce a little less juice. So let me show you here real quick. Hopefully you can see it on the video. Okay, kind of. Okay, so you can kind of see the lines going across this way. So if you cut with the line here, it's going to just produce less juice. Not that the tomatoes aren't juicy, they are, but when you're cutting along a seam like that, there's more of a membrane holding it together. You can think of it like an orange. So cut the tomato in half. This is how I dice tomatoes, not how you have to dice tomatoes. Once I cut it in half, I'm going to cut it longwise, and then I'm going to come across this way. Again, this can be however big of chunks you want your tomatoes. Personal preference. I give you the ingredients for these, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to follow it to a T. If your personal preferences are a little different than mine, that's okay. We just want you to enjoy the meal. These tomatoes smell so good. I am one of those people who is apparently very weird, and I love the smell of tomato vines. It's not even necessarily tomatoes. I'm going to check on my food over here real quick. Okay, so I gave the chicken and the tofu both one more flip just because we added that garlic, and I wanted to make sure that the browning of the garlic really got on both sides of the protein. Also, the balsamic vinegar is not as thick as I would like it to be, so I turned that up a little bit as well. Just chopping tomatoes here, adding them to the bowl. So, once upon a time, quick story time while I'm just chopping tomatoes. If you're from the Warren area, you may or may not be familiar with a pizza place called Padalano's Pizza, with Tony Padalano. So I worked with Tony, not in a pizza shop, at a different eatery, about 10, 11 years ago, 11, 12 years ago. And I love what I used to call bruschetta. And he made it here, not here, but there. And I was bartending, he was a cook, and the one night I asked him when he could make me some bruschetta. And Tony, if you know him, is very Italian. And he says, Lisa, it's bruschetta. It's a k, bruschetta. So, people always look at me like I have 3 heads because, you know, I listen to Tony. He was my pal. So, when he says it's bruschetta, I'm going to believe him that it's bruschetta. So, I no longer say it as bruschetta. But most people still do. So, when I order a bruschetta off the menu or whatever, people look at me like I have 3 heads. I'm not Italian, but trust Tony. It helps that he had like the best pizza ever. So one of the things that we want people to learn from doing these meal plans is that anybody can cook and everybody makes mistakes. So, you know, most of my tomatoes were coming out pretty good. These ones, though, just kind of fell. So, improvise. Cut them. Don't worry about how they look all the time, because they're not going to be perfect. And heck, if you have a slap chop and you want to slap chop this, feel free to slap chop it. Okay. So, I have my herbs, tomatoes, all of that stuff done. I'm going to compost my scraps, get rid of my dirty stuff over here. And then I always keep a bleach rag around just to keep my station clean. 2 rules about cooking: clean as you go, mise en place. So I have everything in here except for 1 teaspoon of balsamic vinegar, 1 tablespoon of oil, a little salt, a little pepper. Okay, so I've gathered the other ingredients. And I'll be honest, this bowl is much smaller than I would like to be mixing it in. So I'm just opening my cupboard to get a bigger bowl. Ta-da! Okay, so I'm just gonna plop everything into this other bowl. It's not much bigger. I'm gonna get out my teeny tiny thing here. So we say that this is about a 30-minute recipe, and we are gonna go over slightly, but not by much, so I'm pretty impressed with it. Salt and pepper. I'm just gonna dip into this balsamic to add 1 teaspoon. Clean as you go. 1 tablespoon of oil. Drizzle it around. And then give it a stir. I am totally one of those people that eats as I go all the time. So to be on a video and not be able to take a bite of a tomato or break off a piece of my tofu as it's cooking kills me. However, if you are really cooking, you should be tasting as you go. So make sure you are tasting to make sure you enjoy the flavor as you go. So the bruschetta is done. If you ask me, it looks pretty darn good. I'm going to hop over to the stove and see how it's going over there. Can I just get into my little cupboard here and get out 2 plates. One for the chicken, one for the tofu. So this is the part where you would plate stuff super nice. I'll be honest, the hubs isn't going to be home from work for another hour, so I will plate it a little nicer when he gets home and he's ready to cook. I just want to make sure this video is done. So if you're ever cooking and you see that there's this brown, it's caramelized, it almost looks like burnt stuff, I'm not using it today with this recipe, but this is the stuff that you want to add a little bit of vinegar or chicken stock, veggie stock, water, whatever, and let it simmer and loosen up all of this, because this is all pure flavor. So it's not the flavor of the dish that we're going for today specifically, because we want that tangy sweetness of the bruschetta, the balsamic glaze, the tomatoes. But if I was making like a chicken and veggies or a chicken and potato dish, this right here is money. And I actually, if you have some of this, and you want to, if you made extra chicken, go ahead and add a little water, steam it, get it loosened up, scrub the chicken on it. It's pretty good. And the tofu. Looking pretty good. So if you cook tofu, that's not nearly as fatty of a food, like a melty fat when you cook, if you know what I mean there. You'll notice that there's not as much of that golden brown delicious stuff in the pan. There's still a little bit. Feel free to do the same thing if you're using the tofu, but it's all flavor. So now all we're waiting for is the balsamic glaze. So I know I literally just told you, microphone's there, I know I literally just told you I wasn't going to plate it fancy because the hubs isn't going to be home anytime soon. I changed my mind. Okay, so if I was in a cafe, I'd totally have gloves on. I'm not, I'm at home. And most home cooks don't even follow the sanitation and cleanliness. So I'm using my hands, they're clean. So we're going to start with a little bit of pasta. Some chicken. When you temp chicken, and this has been sitting off the heat for a few minutes, but you want to go through the thickest part. These little chicken tenderloins that I used aren't very thick, but I take the thermometer and slide it this way because it's going to reach more surface than if I was to go this way. So with poultry, you want it to be about 165. Looks good. So I'm just going to lay these on here. Check on the glaze. that glaze as it's boiling, so pungent in a good way. So next thing, I'm just going to take and put some of the bruschetta on there. So when you dish this up, make sure you really scoop from the bottom, because a lot of the liquids, where all the flavor is, right there. Almost done. So this is still a little thinner than I would like it, but if you stir the bottom, it thickens up a little bit. So we're going to get as fancy as you want with this. You're just going to drizzle this right over. Gosh, it smells so good. If you want to get super fancy and you still have a little bit of basil, or if you keep your own herbs so you have some fresh basil laying around, and there you are. Looks delicious. So I hope you guys are going to enjoy this greatly at home. I am so excited for my tofu. I know you think it's crazy, but it smells great. It's very aromatic. The chicken is so juicy, and I'm just super excited about it. So if you guys try this kit and you like it, please give us some feedback. Please leave us a review and let us know what you're looking forward to next time. Thanks for joining me in my own kitchen at home, and I hope you all have a great day.